Hi everyone. For several years I've wanted to build a Windows XP Pentium 4 machine, and I think this IBM ThinkCentre from the mid-2000s is going to work out perfectly. But why would I want a physical Windows XP machine here in 2023? Well, one of my hobbies is collecting, restoring, and playing around with outdated enterprise machines, mainly from the early 2000s. Most of these machines run some sort of remote management software that's accessible via the browser that is bespoke to the vendor of the machine. These can be used for powering the machines up, powering them down, monitoring their fan levels, loading virtual ISOs in some cases. It can be very useful, and in fact, it's one of the most fun parts of playing with this enterprise gear. Unfortunately, this software is usually running on outdated SSL versions, deprecated software like Java applets or Flash plugins, or both. The best case scenario is that a modern browser gives you an SSL error. The worst case is that it doesn't load the page at all and acts like the management software isn't even available. I've been getting around this by using Windows XP VMs in my Proxmox instance, which is itself running on some rapidly aging servers over in my rack. And it's been incredibly useful to have those Windows XP VMs around, not only for this, but many other things. But why a physical machine? Well, a few reasons. One, nostalgia. I used Windows XP a lot back then. Played a lot of Counter-Strike. And I use those XP VMs all the time to test old software, IDEs, Java versions, and it's going to be really nice to have the option to couple that with physical hardware for things like a real floppy drive, and of course, PCI slots. And then finally, to a certain extent, a retro gaming rig. My requirements are very minimal in this regard, so I think I'll be able to turn this thing into exactly what I need to play some old games. Are we finally going to install and play Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun on the channel? I might put both discs in at the same time. Who knows? Let's open this thing up, make sure it works, clean it up, hopefully get Windows XP on it, and I'll walk you through my plans I've got for it. Let's get into it. This thing is an IBM ThinkCentre A50, and there's no indication really that it is an A50 or anything about the product line other than the ThinkCentre badge on the front. And then you go and look up the model number to determine what exactly it is. This machine isn't necessarily of historical significance, but I find it interesting for a couple reasons. It came out in 2004, and you'll notice it has the full IBM branding. This would have been right before IBM sold off the ThinkCentre line to Lenovo. So it's kind of interesting. This is one of the last ones that's going to have IBM everywhere, even the main board inside. We'll see that in a moment. Now, I think I read online that Lenovo might have even been producing them at this point. I'm not sure about that, but it's definitely fully IBM branded. Another reason I got this is it's got a Pentium 4. I've been wanting to build a Pentium 4 machine, and now that I have it out of the box here, I'm seeing it says HT. I think that stands for hyper-threading. I think the Pentium 4 came out in the year 2000, so this machine was built, 4 years later, so that would have been a later model. But mainly, I just love how it looks. So this is what you would refer to as a workstation. So an IT department would order, hundreds or thousands of these all in the same configuration, and they'd be in an office type setting. But I think IBM was killing it with this design work. So it's also a very unique case. So got this kind of beveling going on here, some USBs on the front, and then it's got this angle, which is super interesting and cool looking with this kind of flare coming off and they had to go to great lengths inside on the drive bays to get them to angle correctly. We'll look at that soon. I'm a big fan of this black line IBM was doing for many years. And in fact, let's compare it to an enterprise rack server of the era. This A50 came out in 2004. This particular unit on the bench here came out in 2006, but this design predates that. So you could call them contemporaries. Of course, we've got the classic IBM logo on both. This blue color, which IBM has used for a long time. You can see it poking out here and on the drive bay, the buttons. So that matches. And you can you just look at these and the same company made them. They definitely had a design system they were pursuing, and I think it looks excellent. Let's get a closer look at this thing. I don't think I conveyed the angle of the front bezel before properly. So, just look at this. That is pretty severe. And when we open it up, you'll see what I mean about the engineering feats they went through. On the back, nothing too special. Empty slot, so something else used to be in here. Onboard audio, which is great. A NIC, it's a 10100 NIC. 4 USB ports, that's pretty nice for 2004. PS2 mouse and keyboard, parallel onboard VGA, which is also very nice. And a serial port. Then of course the power supply. This button here is to release the front bezel. We'll show you that. And we have some shipping damage. So this was not present in the eBay posting, so we'll fix that right now. What am I going to do? Ship it back. Typically what you do to fix bent sheet metal or even, thick metal like this is you take a really big crescent wrench and adjust it just enough, get it on there and wrench up. The problem is in this application, I'm just going to destroy the paint if I do that. So what I'm going to do is I've got these plastic shims. I'm going to cut them a little bit. I'm going to try to put one on the bottom, put one on the top, and then we'll clamp some vice grips down on there and see if we can just slowly bend it up and hopefully not destroy the paint. I need a third hand. Oh, I wonder if I could just tape these on there. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, check that out. Not in love with it, but it is certainly better. Moving on, let's slide this case off. It's pretty toolless, which is nice. And then what we're gonna do is depress that blue button on the back. You can see the bezel has started moving. This whole assembly comes off, which is kind of nice. Then on the front here, we've got an OEM CD-ROM, an additional DVD-ROM that was added later. I'll show you how I know in a second. OEM 3.5-inch floppy and a hard drive cage. The only thing wrong with this machine, is that it doesn't have a hard drive. Everything else should be fine and the seller claims it works. So this is a drive cage. I think you need additional plastic pieces that are missing to actually get a drive to slot in there, but we won't be using that anyway. And then 2 USB ports. Here on the side, you can see that angled drive cage to make everything line up on the bezel on the front. And you can see the drives angling off the back there, kind of funny. This is how I know the floppy drive and the CD-ROM are OEM. They have these toolless little plastic tabs you can press in to slide the unit out, whereas the DVD-ROM just has screws, which makes sense. I think I'd like to pull these drives out just to have a look at them, see what they're all about, dust them off. So like I was saying, you depress that, slides right out. And then the way this works, you have this metal plate that sits in the screw slots and gives you this little plastic, it's metal actually, coated metal. I forgot I was dealing with IBM. And that lets you slide this thing in and then have a toolless entry and exit. And here we've got a BTC, Behavior Tech Computer Corp, dated April 2005. Aha, look at that. Manufactured for Lenovo, even though it's probably got the IBM field replaceable unit numbers. So yeah, Lenovo was already involved, I guess. The A50 I was telling you is from 2004, but this unit must be from 2005. Floppy disk out of here. Yeah, there's that little piece I was talking about. And we have an Alps Electric with the IBM part numbers, of course. Very cool. So clunky without the toolless piece. I'm exhausted. I really hope there's not screws on the other side. Yes! I unplugged those other two. This one just wasn't plugged in for whatever reason. And we have a pretty old DVD-ROM drive, November 2007, LG. Bet it still works. This LG stuff tends to just keep on trucking. All right, full disclosure, I forgot I already pulled the RAM out. But this is the OEM RAM. You've got the IBM part number and FRU and everything. 256 megs. That's all this thing has right now. Let's get in here. So I'm gonna pull these, get them out of our way. I am usually the type of person that just fires a machine right up, but I have been getting so burnt with CPUs lately that I want to get this thing off of here and take a look. IBM always has these nice pull handles on their stuff, and similar to their enterprise equipment, this blue means that this can't happen while the machine is running. So there's nothing in here that can be hot swappable. So usually it'd be orange or red or something, but yeah, that's what that blue color means. This is kind of tight in here to get into these. Kind of annoying. Floppy cable. So in here we've got 3 PCI slots and an AGP port. I have a card on order for that actually. 4 DIMM slots, DDR1 I think. And yeah, everything's looking pretty good. She's got, yeah, some character in the smell department, I'm not gonna lie, but nothing too bad. Let's get this big old thing off. Oh, I just took this off accidentally. That's nice. Okay, this is out of my way. This little PCI clamp, card clamp. It's a flathead for some reason. All right, I understand what's going on here now. When you loosen this guy up enough and it flops over so that I think theoretically we can pull the assembly out. Let's get that fan unplugged. Yeah, it's loose for sure. Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm glad I pulled it. Might not have been the end of the world. Look at this IBM FRU tag. That was just sitting on the CPU. So I keep saying FRU. It stands for Field Replaceable Unit. IBM puts those on everything. The motherboard's going to have one. The CPU itself has one. It harkens back from the very early days of computing when you'd have, service personnel come and actually replace a field replaceable unit. I don't know if IBM came up with that name, but they use it all over the place, even in this x86, more modern stuff. Forgot how small Pentium 4s were. There she is. Let's get it cleaned up. Well, I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. Nothing's really damaged in that case. Pentium 4, 3 gigahertz, 1M, I think it says, 800. Awesome. Well, we've got the case like this. It's supposed to have rubber feet, so I cleaned all the gunk off from those. I don't have any rubber ones on hand, but I do have these felt ones, which probably will be nicer anyway, so let's get those on there. They're a little too big, and I can't find super glue, so I'm almost guaranteed gonna have to do this again, but for now, it'll probably hold up. Yeah, that'll be nice. Wouldn't be a PC video if we weren't replacing one of these. I was getting so excited busting out the thermal compound that I almost forgot to deal with this. Ah, yes. Blew that out with an air compressor. Wasn't going to mess around with that. Good enough for me. And this thing is silent, so let's put it back on. Got that 256 meg stick back in there while I've got room. I have actually a lot more DDR1 RAM, but it's all server ECC RAM. And it's possible, but I doubt that this motherboard supports that. Healthy glob. I know people have all sorts of opinions about how to do this, but that's what I do. And I do kind of wiggle it around a little bit, spread that out evenly. Is it just me? Is this heatsink like total overkill? I don't remember them being this intense on Pentium 4s, but maybe I'm misremembering. Been a long time. Oh yeah, those felt pads are great. That's perfect. I am very excited to see if this thing's gonna post. Got a pretty primo setup here. Ergonomic keyboard, gotta take care of my wrists. And then a VGA to HDMI adapter. That'll be high quality, no doubt. Going into an HDMI video capture card. And I will record the screen as we turn this on, and yeah, let's see if it posts. eBay seller said it did, but they'll tell you anything. Okay, moment of truth. Turn it on. Plug it in. Now turn it on. It's on. Wonder if my capture setup's broken. It's nice and quiet. Great fan. Okay, capture setup 2.0. I changed adapters and it started working. I think I can call this a post. Yeah, IBM just loves freaking out when you change stuff. Sorry about the banding. Let's do setup. Yeah, we're in. Okay. One thing I was excited about with this board is it has SATA. And I think that's going to unlock interesting use cases here to just make this machine more flexible for me. All right, let's give you the full posting experience this time. Control-Delete. Pentium 4. Mad that it doesn't have a mouse. Gonna go look for a boot device, which it doesn't have. No operating system found. Cool. Next, we're gonna get that machine cleaned up the rest of the way, put back together, but we need to talk about the storage options I've come up with. So what's really nice about this machine is it supports SATA. So worst case scenario, it has one SATA power connector, and I can just put a regular old spinning Rust SATA drive in there. I have a couple of these. Another option is something called an IDE to compact flash adapter. I think I'm going to install this anyway. It's going to be a nice way to have potentially another boot device on the machine, and I can put OSs on these compact flash. I have a USB to compact flash adapter I can use on my other modern machine, so that's another good option. But I also picked up this thing called a SATA DOM, a SATA disk on module. This plugs directly into the SATA port. It's 8 gigabytes. Now these aren't very performant, and I read that they can have reliability issues. To be honest with you, this machine isn't going to be on 24/7. It just needs to work most of the time. So I just thought this would be kind of cool to mess around with. There's 2 SATA ports on that machine, and if this works, I can have, you know, XP on one, another OS on another, and swap them out really easily, and I think it would be sort of a cool route. So I'm going to try that out. If I can get it working in the video, of course, I'll experiment with it for a few months and see how I like it, but I think that could be a cool option. And there you go. Let's get the rest of this cleaned up. This is your best friend. I haven't done that cable dance in a while, but we're back together. All buttoned up. Now let's address the elephant in the room. The Windows XP installer doesn't support SATA out of the box. Check this setup out. This is computing. There's the keyboard for the ThinkCentre, and my monitor is the HDMI capture card over here, so that's why I'm looking around all the time. If this isn't peak computing, I don't want any part of it. We're in the BIOS here. Got the capture set up. This banding you're seeing is my really crappy VGA to HDMI adapter. I will up my game for future videos. Once we get Windows installed, I'll see if it makes more sense to just point you at the screen with the camera. So let's go over to devices and take a look at IDE drives. SATA is on. A note I was implying earlier, so the Windows XP installer out of the box doesn't have SATA drivers. You have to actually supply them via floppy disk or bake them into the ISO. I'll show you my strategy in a second. Never done it before. But some boards will let you set native mode operation to on. And I've never tried this, but I believe this will trick Windows into thinking a SATA drive is an IDE drive. It'll operate at IDE speeds, but that's one route too, as I understand it. So over in the startup sequence, we can boot from a USB drive. So that's great. That's probably what we're going to try to do to get it installed. It notices the top CD-ROM and the DVD drive. That's great. Now, I don't see any SATA stuff in here. Maybe it's PCI SCSI. I'm not sure. It might be one of these IDEs. The SATA settings were under the IDE settings. So maybe that's the case. So what I'm going to do, we don't need a USB floppy drive. We don't need a CD. We don't need to boot off the LAN, but we will add every IDE device that is not a CD. And luckily, for some reason, this machine lets you set a ridiculous amount of eight boot devices in the list, so that's great. So that's what I'm going to go with. It'll look for a USB first. That's how we're going to try to install Windows, and then plow through all the IDE devices, hopefully one of which is that SATA DOM. Not optimistic about that. So let's save and exit. These days, there's a version of the Windows ISO called the Integral Edition. It's constantly getting updates. I've never used it. There's lots of information online and YouTube videos you can go look up. But long story short, for my purposes, it has SATA drivers built in. I think it's going to totally undo my whole point of needing older IE versions and older browsers, because it's as up to date as Windows XP can get. It's got all the service packs. It's got a bunch of extra stuff you can install. Pretty impressive sounding. So I'm going to cheat today and see if I can get this installed, and then I might look into rolling my own ISO just with the SATA drivers I need. So I guess what everyone's doing these days is use a tool called Win Setup from USB. You point it at a USB stick, and then you point it at the extracted ISO for the Windows XP version you want to install. I think it's really awesome that there is a huge community around keeping Windows XP alive. This is really cool. It's been cool to learn about this. So I'm going to make this USB stick. Oh, it's just, yeah, it's going to erase the disk. Oh, man. I'm going to let that do its thing and then pop it in the ThinkCentre, and hopefully we'll be in business. Let's get this guy in the machine. Moment of truth. Control-Delete. I'll try to get a screen grab of that IBM ThinkCentre. I saw something there. Woohoo! This looks like a booting USB. Okay. I think we want to do auto... Oh, I'm on the wrong keyboard. Auto detect the RAID driver. Didn't like that. Yeah, it's not finding that SATA DOM. We'll see. Only sees that USB stick. Let's try flash card. Got a compact flash to IDE adapter in there. Had to sacrifice our floppy disk power, but if it works, we can sort that out later with a little splitter, and then an 8 GB compact flash card in there. We'll see if this works. Windows setup found it, formatted it, no problem. I have never successfully used one of those little adapters, IDE to compact flash. So cool. I think we're in good shape. I'll be back. Come on, you can do it. That splash screen is like way too fast. Ooh, look at this. This is good news. Now we sit through the real installer. That other one was just the warm-up. That IDE to flash adapter must be pretty slow. It just rebooted. That's terrible news. Yeah, I don't like this. Can't say I've ever seen that one. Can't find unzip.exe. It can't find a lot of stuff. That's fine. We're good. Everything's fine. Ugh. All right, I'm going to grab another ISO. We're just going to do it the old-fashioned way. We're going to stick with what we know. Let's see what we get. We have a mouse this time. That's better. Well, it's about a week later, but I've got good news. Finally did get Windows XP installed. Definitely not knocking that Integral Edition. Probably just didn't know what I was doing, and I was too impatient to troubleshoot, so stuck with a simpler ISO, had no trouble. And in fact, we installed Windows twice, so I realized I had been using one of these really cheap 100 megabytes per second compact flash cards. I had initially got this whole compact flash set up imagining I'd use it with older machines from the mid-90s. So upgraded to this much faster 120 megabyte per second SanDisk, actual name brand compact flash card, and the install actually anecdotally went a lot faster and the OS is running smoother, so that's great. Also got a better VGA to HDMI converter, but hopefully that won't matter, because here we've got a ATI Radeon 9600 with 128 megs of RAM, and it's got DVI out, and my DVI to HDMI converter is generally much better. Now this is sort of a nostalgia build, and I wouldn't have been running something this nice. Not that this is particularly nice, but I wouldn't have had something even this nice back in 2003. That's when this guy came out. I couldn't quite remember what I had, but I know it wasn't this good. And in fact, I went back and looked at my Newegg history, and the first sort of real card I ever bought for myself was back in 2008, a NVIDIA 9800 GT, which, as I recall, wasn't even that nice back then. So that'll kind of give you an idea for what I was dealing with. I didn't really have nice gear. I always had a computer. I was always able to play games, but it was never top end, definitely in the mid-2000s, early 2000s. And I think I mentioned earlier about that Pentium 4 having way too big of a heatsink, or I didn't remember them being that big. Did a little more research, and yeah, those things throw off tons of heat, so I got a case fan to help it out a little bit, pull air through the case across that CPU a little better, and I think that'll make a little bit of a difference. And then of course, we're going to fully blow it out with 4 gigs of RAM. So we're going from the 512 meg stick that's in there to 4 full gigs. That'll be super exciting. They're nearly identical RAM. It's the same ProMOS stuff, but from a Dell OEM machine. So, you know, good enough. So I'll get this stuff in the machine and we'll see if it all works. 4th time's a charm. Basically, everything was booting fine, found the video card, RAM, everything. But it would take like 10 minutes to get past the welcome screen. And that sort of screams hard drive issue. And so I think this thing is the culprit. Don't know why, but I have a cheapo SSD. The BIOS recognized it, and we're going to install XP for a 4th time, and hopefully the ISO has the right SATA drivers. Well, it took us 4 tries, but look at this. Glorious. Fresh install, and is there anything better than firing up your old friend's CPU ID to take a look at what you've got? Intel Pentium 4, of course, HT, 3 gigahertz. The main board is actually an Intel D865GKD with the IBM BIOS, of course, and the IBM branding on it on the PCB mainboard silkscreen. Detects all 4 gigabytes. We're maxed out. Love it. It kinda knows that it's got an ATI Radeon something. Over in settings, it knows it's got a Radeon 9600 series. So yeah, this is great. It obviously looks a lot better in person. This whole video has made me realize my capture setup is very lacking for all of this stuff, so I will improve. But this is great. The system is healthy. Let's get some more stuff on it. Look how good this is. Like this full-blown install experience. They just don't do it like this anymore. I have one of those. Oh, yes. Yes. I can tell this computer is perfect for me because it's kind of slow. Kind of what I'm used to. So good, folks. So good. Well, let's also do what we came here for, which is managing an enterprise server. Here we go. The IDRAC on my Dell R510 running my TrueNAS instance. I think you all have seen me load this up before. So yeah, this is a newer server, and I think I could update this IDRAC. I just haven't gotten around to it. But this is really what I use these Windows XP VMs for. So I'm really excited to have a physical machine. Well, I think I'd be a little remiss if I didn't talk about ThinkCentre in general. So here is a Lenovo M900 Tiny. It's got an Intel i5. This came out in 2015. So it's 10 years newer than that one on the right there, that ThinkCentre A50. I think you could argue that it's one of the successors. And you can see to this day, they are sort of keeping the design alive. So, of course, the red ThinkCentre, the name and everything, this branding hasn't changed since the IBM days. And there's sort of these sharp angles you still have with the venting and the red here. And interestingly enough, the power button is near identical, except that when this one's powered on, it lights up green and this one doesn't. But clearly that is inspired by or directly from. So I kind of like that Lenovo has kept that alive, the design aesthetic. And I've had this for a couple years. Rock solid machine. I have been very tempted to pick up a few more just because it's not like I need them. And if I had less room and I wanted a pretty rock solid home lab, I would pick up a couple of these and be done with it. And it'd probably be a better setup, arguably, than what I've got with the big rack. These are rock solid. They're kind of the unsung heroes of the home lab until very recently. A lot more YouTube videos in the last 2 or 3 years are coming out about how these can be such a steal. And they come in just a million different configurations with different outputs and everything depending on the enterprise that bought it, you know, what their needs were. I remember being pretty disappointed when IBM sold off the ThinkCentre and the ThinkPad line to Lenovo. I can't really speak for the laptops. I haven't had one of those in over 10 years. But these workstation units, I can speak very highly of. These are rock solid machines, at least this M900 I have. So I'm glad that at least these are keeping up. You can tell this was a good machine in its day in terms of build quality. I think the Pentium 4, as we all know, was a little bit of a flop. But this machine itself seems pretty rock solid. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm super excited to finally have an early 2000s Windows XP physical machine again. I probably hadn't installed Windows XP on a real machine in like 15 years or something, as it showed. So I have all sorts of plans for this thing. I'm going to use it all the time. One of which will be getting this thing networked up as a remote client to an IBM X336 eServer. The eServer is going to be acting as an HMC, or hardware management console, for an IBM P5. So what we're going to have is 3 IBMs, period correct, operating again as maybe they once were, which is like super exciting. And I hope you had a good time following along as I messed around with this ThinkCentre A50. I've always been fascinated by the look and feel of these ThinkCentre machines, and I'm really proud to own an IBM branded one. I think that's really cool. If you like this kind of content, go ahead and check me out on Patreon. I try to post behind the scenes type videos and the occasional early access video. In the meantime, I hope you found this enjoyable, and I'll see you in the next one.